There's a scene where Ashitaka bends the opponent's sword with just one finger, and at the end breaks it with his thumb and index finger. But that expression clearly shows how his anger goes out of control and becomes monstrous. Now when Ashitaka is told to show the wound on his arm and takes off the bandage, this is how the wound looks like. In a cut that shows his arm with scars, you can also see Jomon pottery drawn in the background in the obvious way. By showing the Jomon pottery, Miyazaki is saying, they're Jomon people, okay? But there is one more function to this. The winding scar on Ashitaka's arm, the pattern of Jomon pottery, and the snaky stuff crawling all over the Tatari God's body all look alike. And Deidarabachi, or the Night Walker, who comes out in the climax, also has this Jomon patterns wriggling inside its body. If you see the character reference, it says, the Night Walker looks like the night sky is walking. It also resembles a walking Jomon pottery. What I'm trying to say is that we unconsciously see Ashitaka's cursed arm and think it's making him suffer or he's gonna die soon because of it. But the pattern of the scar that we see with the pottery is actually the signature of Jomon gods. In other words, it is a sign that Ashitaka is cursed, but at the same time also given a stigma by the gods. He of course becomes a Tatari God because of this curse, but he also gains superpower. The reason why the wise woman talks to Ashitaka about the curse in such a poker face is because she's acting. Neither the villagers nor Ashitaka notice it, but there is an unspoken intention only in her mind. The real consequence of Ashitaka's curse is not that he dies, but he becomes another Tatari God. From this point, Ashitaka is slowly turning into a Tatari God. Just like the monster that has attacked the village a little while ago, his pain and suffering gradually becomes unbearable and he begins to curse his fate. The wild boar god who attacks the village also must have controlled the curse with his reason at first, but gradually becomes a Tatari God. In the same manner, Ashitaka is destined to be the next Tatari God. Later, in a battle, he shoots his arrow normally, but he shows a monstrous power, and the arrow tears off the opponent's samurai's both arms. When he shoots the next arrow, it easily chops off the opponent's head, which surprises Ashitaka himself. This is because at this point he's given a sacred power which is also cursed. The power of the curse invites Ashitaka to a suffering that leads to death, while the sacred power increases his strength infinitely. Also in Irontown, he carries wounded son and says, "Out of my way, I'm going." Then he pushes a huge wooden gate open with one hand, which usually requires dozens of people to open. Again, he does it with his cursed right hand. This means when Ashitaka feels anger or sadness or something illogical, he gains infinite power. We only see scenes where Ashitaka manages to control and uses his infinite power at will and think that's all there is. But they definitely portray the process of Ashitaka gradually becoming a monster. In fact, the conflict of whether Ashitaka can survive as a human or become a Tatari God is another substructure that's hidden in the story. However, it is now very noticeable. After all, I think why people can't notice it is because the movie was titled Princess Mononoke, which made the piece look like a romance movie. But it's not a romance, it's a story about Ashitaka. It's really the legend of Ashitaka. Ashitaka has despair and anger in his mind, but on the surface, he shows no emotion and acts gently. And Miyazaki said that in this movie, he decided not to portray Ashitaka's inner despair and anger. The reason for that is because while he was making the movie, he talked to Ryotaro Shiba, a novelist, and was deeply impressed by what Shiba said, and thought, "I get it! People who complain so easily are wimps! Now I see why I hate Hideaki Hideaki Anno's Evangelion, the tiny little wimp keeps on whining, I'm unfortunate, I'm unfortunate. Shiba told him, people who are truly unfortunate do not whine, but they rather become well-mannered. Miyazaki was so impressed and that became the inspiration. That's why Ashitaka's inner voices are not spoken through lines, unlike Dora in Castle in the Sky who speaks to herself. This might be more convenient. As a result, the depiction of Ashitaka progressively becoming a monster is shown through pictures, but we somehow see that as a superhero using superpower. But that's not how it should be seen. There's a scene where Ashitaka bends the opponent's sword with just one finger, and at the end breaks it with his thumb and index finger. But that expression clearly shows how his anger goes out of control and becomes monstrous. At first, Ashitaka also calms down and controls his mind. Even when he's told rudely to leave the village, he just sighs and says, okay. But in the latter half of the movie, his power goes out of his control more and more when he becomes emotional. And the wise woman is the only person in the village who notices it. It is not the dead Tatari God that she is afraid of. It is Ashitaka who would one day lose human nature and turns into a Tatari God that she's most afraid of. That's why she thinks Ashitaka is a good boy and would have taken over our village and become a good king. But now he will become a monster because of the pain and resentment and the anger towards the absurdity that has descended upon him. Let's kick him out of the village before that happens.